Have you ever wanted to experience what it feels like to step into the House of Wisdom? If you didn't know, it's basically a place filled with centuries of knowledge, where great scholars gather, sharing their discoveries and inventions. Each of them has their own domain and specialty, and you get the chance to witness all of it. Isn't that so cool? If that kind of world sounds interesting to you, then House of Hikmah may be exactly the kind of experience you're looking for. In this game, you play as Maya, trying to understand the legacy her father left behind after he passed away. And that legacy leads you to the House of Wisdom itself, a world inspired by the Islamic Golden Age. With a mysterious device called the key that your father left behind, you will unlock paths in this world, solve puzzles created by the scholars, and slowly piece together what your father had been working on all this time. But one thing to keep in mind, the deeper you go, you start to realize there are things you might not be ready to face. Because in the end, this journey isn't just about discovery. It's also about facing the grief you carry. So, what will you actually find at the end of this path? If you enjoy puzzle platformers or you're curious about a story inspired by the Islamic Golden Age, I think this is something you might really enjoy.
Welcome to Heart Fluff XO Cozy Corner, a cozy little space where the magic of storytelling brings you comfort. Before that, if you love visual novel story-rich or otome games, or if you want to learn Japanese with otome games and experience some heart-fluffy romance, I suggest you to subscribe to this channel because you are in the right place.
As the synopsis says, the game begins with Maya's father, who leads her to the House of Wisdom, a place where great scholars of the Islamic Golden Age preserve their inventions and discoveries. And honestly, it's really amazing to see all of this brought to life in the game. The moment you arrive, you're greeted by Fatima, who guides you on how to use the key, a device left behind by your father that takes some time to truly understand. And the way to understand it is by actually using it. Practice is better than just theory, right? So, to unlock its full potential, Maya needs to travel across different realms, each one representing a scholar's domain. So, yes, you'll get to explore different areas with their own specialties. And it's honestly really fun to see the variety between each domain. There are areas where you glide through the wind, realms focus on alchemy and astronomy, and even a massive library where you climb higher and higher to reach a book. I love how each realm reflects the scholar it represents. You can really see the difference in their focus and ideas. By solving puzzles throughout these worlds, Maya gradually uncovers more about her father's legacy and what the key along with its elements really is. And I actually really enjoyed piecing this part together. In fact, one of the most charming aspects of this game is definitely the key itself, its core mechanic. The key allows you to transform elements in each realm, and there are 4 main elements gradually introduced as you progress: ether, glass, metal, and energy. Each of them has its own meaning and purpose. In these realms, you'll encounter something called mystic objects with glowing patterns that can be transmuted from one state to another using the key. And yeah, that part is just really cool. With the key, you will solve puzzles created by the scholars and unlock new paths in really creative ways. For example, you can walk through walls using the ether element, bend like using glass, shift way through metal transmutation, and even glide through looping wind currents. And yes, you really do get carried by the wind, and it just feels so freeing. Honestly, having the key feels really satisfying to use. It really shows how incredible Maya's father invention is. I genuinely love how each element feels meaningful, and it makes the puzzle feel really exciting to explore. Now, speaking of puzzles, this is where I was actually surprised. They're actually not as difficult as they might seem at first. Once you understand the mechanics, everything starts to click. You just have to really look around, pay attention to your surroundings, and listen carefully to what the scholars say. There were moments where I got stuck, and then after getting a hint, I suddenly went, wait, Why didn't I think of that? It was right in front of me. And honestly, that's what makes it satisfying because unlike some games where I get stuck on a puzzle and even after seeing the answer, I still don't fully understand why. But here, everything actually makes sense. And this is coming from someone who usually doesn't even like puzzles in games, by the way. But here, figuring things out and unlocking Maya's path just feels really rewarding. Like, discovering her father's legacy is truly my most favorite part in the game. My absolute favorite thing to do in this game is definitely traversing through the wind currents and transmuting elements. So satisfying, especially when you're moving objects through the air using ether element. It's just so cool to see. I won't spoil too much of the mechanics. I think it's something you'll really enjoy discovering for yourself. As Maya moves forward, each door she opens slowly reveals more about her father's legacy, right? But like I mentioned before, it's not just that. She soon begins to discover something unexpected within the House of Wisdom. A shadow lurking across this world, a voice filled with regret and agony. This presence slowly seeps into each realm, affecting not only the scholars but Maya as well. And this is where you begin to realize this journey isn't just about uncovering the truth, but also about facing the grief you've been holding on to. I won't go too much into what this shadow is because I think it's something better experience on your own. But the deeper you go, the more you'll start to understand its connection to Maya's father. And this is actually where my experience started to feel a little conflicted. Because while I really appreciate what this game is trying to say, especially through its themes of grief and legacy, along with its satisfying puzzle platforming, there were moments where the experience didn't fully come together for me. For example, I do think the transitions between scenes could be improved. At times, they didn't feel as smooth as they could be. And even though the game draws heavily from the Islamic Golden Age and the concept of the House of Wisdom is a really fascinating foundation, I feel like the game doesn't spend enough time introducing this world to players who might not already be familiar with it. So, while I understood that each scholar had their own domain and field of knowledge, I didn't always feel fully connected to it because I didn't have enough context going in. Sometimes it feels like the game assumes you already understand these historical elements instead of gradually guiding you into them. I think even a brief introduction explaining what the House of Wisdom is or what this era represents would have made the experience feel much more immersive and easier to connect with. And I think part of why the emotional side didn't fully land for me is because I never felt fully grounded in the world to begin with. Since the game doesn't spend much time building that foundation, it made it harder for me to truly connect with the emotions later on. At its core, House of Hikmah carries a message about grief, about how it stays with us, but also how we should face it. And while I understood that message clearly, I personally felt that the emotional impact didn't fully land for me. It felt more like I was understanding it rather than truly feeling it. But even so, House of Hikmah is still a really enjoyable game, especially if you love puzzle platformers or even if you usually don't enjoy puzzles. I honestly think this game might change your perspective. There's something really satisfying about how the mechanics work, especially with the key and its unique elements. And if you want to connect more deeply with the story, I would recommend learning a bit about the Islamic Golden Age beforehand because I do feel like the experience becomes much more meaningful when you understand that context. It may not have fully hit me emotionally, but it still left me with something to think about. And I think it's a message that a lot of people might need to hear. And good news, Lunacy Studios kindly provided me with some game keys for a giveaway. So if you think this game might be something you would enjoy or you're curious to try it yourself, you can join by commenting down below and sharing which aspect of the game interests you the most. I'll be picking a few winners from there. and I really hope you got a chance to experience this game too. That's all for today's video. I hope this helped introduce you to a game that might resonate with you, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye!